turn back.
Okie doke. That's how he got a couple cities named after him.
Yeah, well, Cook came past that part of Canada and around near Seattle and all that at one point. Maybe he might have been, I don't know if he was a discoverer of Vancouver Island, maybe just, well, we'll name it after something British.
The other thing I wanted to say,
that's an interesting fact about the Columbia that river is that the British and the Russians, there was a time right around the time Lewis and Clark were up there, the Colombians were sailing, the Russians were sailing through the river. Everybody was like interested in what potential claims that they could possibly stake in that area.
They were all playing civilization.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, David.
the other thing I wanted to say was the last week, we of course had a lot of discussion about moods and, well, attunements. And I had actually listened to this one in advance, and I was kind of biting my tongue because this one actually covers a lot more and I think answers a lot of the questions that people were asking about. I hope this cleared up a little bit more about moods. The idea that you're going to, a mood will be another method that will launch you into that deworlding, as Matt puts it, the deworlding space. Anxiety does the same thing, but anxiety is itself a part of mood. Angst is a type of a mood.
Is fear a mood?
The what?
Fear, is that a mood? Fear?
Yes.
I think it could be, yeah. Being in love could be, yeah. Sickness, illness, yeah. Extreme happiness, yeah. I mean, there's lots of anything. If you take it correctly, it can be used as a method that will deworld you, get you into a new headspace, a new perspective, a new vantage point from which you see things in a completely new light and different. And it could happen just for milliseconds. It could happen for seconds, or it could last for hours or longer. I mean, you know, a peak experience, just some kind of way of just seeing things completely differently, where you're out of, well, what we now call fascination, where you're out of, I think of it called, he didn't use the word, but I use it, stunned, where you're just stunned. You're stunned. You're not thinking. You're just, you know, falling in line, following the crowd, following the way everything is done. But when you get into that deworlded space, that Duncan space of just being defascinated, de-stunned, and your eyes suddenly pop open and you realize, and then you start, and you don't realize anything. You just question what's going on. How is this happening? And it could last for seconds. And as Matt and Heidegger were saying, the idea is everybody at some point or another is going to go through a situation, an experience like that. I think a lot of people don't even bother making note of it, but some people it could be a very profound experience.
Is that what later on the Sartre refers to as nausea, and Camus talks about the absurd?
Actually, yes, and we'll get there depending. Yeah. But
like
actually, yes.
Yeah, that's he probably influenced those guys to
We'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
Yeah, but before
Promise.
you get to that, there's fear and and anxiety. He spent quite a few pages talking about the other. After he talked about they, right? He talked about the other. And the other is what, you are in the world, Dasein is in the world with the other. Now, what is the significance of that, the other?
Wait, I don't remember that. I remember the uncanny.
No, it's,
and the difference between fear and anxiety, but I don't remember the other.
Really? Okay.
Was it in the beginning of the 240?
Yeah, just before the you know, the chapter on the
On falling and thrownness?
yeah, yeah. It's just before that.
Would you say the question again, Jen?
Yeah, it's the he spent quite a few chapters before being in as such. That's the next chapter. But in the chapter before that, he spends quite a few pages talking about the other.
Well, that means the they. The
Oh,
other
other
is other people.
Right. I think, yeah,
Meaning and their influence upon you.
right. But
So
it seemed like he was distinguishing the they from the other.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think
It's just
so.
that the other is just a nicer word for it. It's it's like animals and interworldly beings. Interworldly being is kind of like code for animals, but when he wants to say, when he says animals, he's distinguishing animals from plants and from Dasein. When he's trying to design, when he's just speaking loosely of Dasein plus animals, he's using the term interworldly being. So it's like sometimes he just shifts. He will shift terms in a kind of like in a casual way sometimes. That's one of them. Others and the they.
Yeah, like he says it here at in one paragraph, he said, Dasein understands itself proximally and for the most part in terms of its world, semicolon, and the Dasein with of others is often encountered in terms of what is ready to hand within the world.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So the ready to hand, of course, is things, but the others are the proximal others, the proximal they. So the other people that we interact with in the world are the others.
Yeah, it sounds like he's trying to establish a very strong relationship of Dasein with other. The other
Absolutely
is very important.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a misunderstanding that I was a little bit subject to. The other Dasein has to have a friendly relationship, or let's put it this way: Dasein has to have a constructive relationship with others, for the sake of himself and his own projects.
Right.
So there's no question of the others are actually opposed to Dasein, but the others have a complete independence as other Daseins, and the others are located in the world, not inside Dasein.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm actually interested in the nowhere and the nothing. And
where's that?
I have time to get to that. I mean, so I'm not rushing it, but I just remember being confused by it and reading that section a couple of times.
Well, I can pull it up. Where is it?
Well, I was reading Being in Time, and I was looking at both translations, and then I looked at what you sent on existentialism, the actual, and so, but I can't underline anything from that. I can only underline the books that I put in Acrobat or in my Kindle, so.
Okay.
May I break in?
But I downloaded it.
Can you hear me? I wondered if I could just ask a fundamental question because I'm new to this group. What is the text you were referring to? This existentialism text? Is this a work by Heidegger?
David has to answer.
Being in Time.
Being in Time. So when you talk about page numbers and sections, you're talking about being in time, right?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
That's where we get confused. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've sent a PDF that has excerpts from Being in Time, which don't correspond to a published copy of Being in Time, because it was published in a college textbook.
Okay, and the title of that document is Existentialism? Because I see reference to a text
The
called
name,
existentialism.
the proper name of the textbook, which has a number of different authors
Yes.
featured, is Existentialism.
Okay. And this is a
But
book that you get. Is it online, or do you buy a copy of the book?
David supplies it before the meeting. So in other words, if you didn't find it for this meeting, it was in the meeting previous that he published it. So he actually mimeographs some copies of a few
Okay.
pages prior to the meeting.
Very good. Thank you very much. I had no idea what we were talking about. Thanks.
Sure.
however, just to add to the confusion, or maybe this is clarifying it, it's the paragraphs all relate to all the versions of Being in Time. So when it says paragraph, what do you call it, section 30,
Right. Yeah. There's a
falling and
standard
throwness,
number.
you're
Yeah.
going to find that in Being in Time, in
Right.
whatever version you have.
Sure. Yeah. I understand. I would understand that.
And that's very helpful for me
Yeah.
to go by the, I call them paragraphs. It's not a paragraph sign. What do you call that sign?
Hey, Audrey, I
Yeah.
think I'm ready to make ready to make a stab at nowhere and nothing.
Okay.
Yeah,
go for
okay.
it.
Nowhere and nothing are measures of ambiguity. So what happens is that the they, in kind of like an advanced form of the they, will throw up nowhere and nothing, or it could even be your thrownness. It could come out of your own thrownness, but nowhere and nothing will sort of pop up for you as in order to stimulate your moods away from your project. So and try to force you back into alignment with your thrownness, your inauthentic self.
And that makes perfect sense. But I was wondering if I could find the section, if somebody could tell me what section.
I have the Heidegger numbers
Okay.
that are in the index of the Stambau.
Okay.
Okay. So for nowhere, I just looked it up. It's 174, 177, 186 to 188, and 347. It says, see also curiosity and anxiety. And
Okay.
and then-
So I opened the Stombag book here, but
Yeah.
it's still section 39. If it's
yeah, that sounds right.
yeah.
About section 39. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I got the impression, I'm still not finding the part that I read earlier yesterday, where I thought nowhere and nothing were two different things. Not necessarily just like saying nowhere and nothing. It was like, the way he delineates anxiety and then fear being, you have anxiety that could be fear, which makes it, if it's fear, it becomes an anxious anxiety. When he talks like that, I'm wondering if he's just playing with words or if there's like actual distinctions that he's making.
Yeah.
Well, no, there is a qualitative difference. I mean, nowhere is obviously a denial of the there,
Right.
and nothing is a denial of being.
Of the being, of the
Being.
Okay,
Yeah.
I got it. That makes more sense. I just wanted to clarify that.
So
Right.
I think perhaps I could help give kind of a sense for just like a very average sense for like the distinction between fear and anxiety, as I've understood it so far in Heidegger. Fear has like some particular thing that is feared. So it can be a fear of like somebody responding to you in a certain way. It can be a fear of like a threat, like maybe a car in the street. Like fear has a specified kind of like circumstance that makes sense. In anxiety, one's ability to make sense of a circumstance drops away. So like if you've ever had like really bad anxiety,
Yes.
there's this sense of like not even knowing how to move your body, not even like knowing what to say to other people. Like, you can't latch into some kind of an intelligible order. It's like one sense of how to comport themselves, what to say, what to do drops out, and you're just kind of left hanging in this kind of like void like space where it's just like everything's bare and there's no, you can't latch into something to do without this like really awkward forcing. Whereas in fear, it's specified and there's like a target and there's a way to respond.
Yeah.
Anxiety lacks that sense of like something you can grasp and make sense.
Okay, that makes perfect sense too. Thank you. And that's so true, actually. I mean, in terms of like personal experience, definitely. I mean, fear comes from being actually, there's some being that there's something you're relating to. It's not
Right.
like,
And
yeah.
the German, it's interesting, the German word is actually Angst. So in other words, in English, anxiety sounds like fear to a lot of people.
Right.
Now I've learned to separate the two, but I think if you take the original German word for that he used, Angst, then it becomes a little bit more clear. Oh, he was talking to something that's not necessarily fear, but it's this questioning of the self. Yeah, the questioning of the self.
Like teenage angst or angst.
Exactly. Yeah.
Matt spoke to this, and David, can you remember he actually spoke and gave a specific clarification of what you mentioned, James, the angst feeling. And I can't remember his good example. It was a good example, but I can't remember it. Does anyone remember how he defined that? The angst.
I remember it was a good example. I just can't remember the example. He was explaining it to somebody that asked a question. Yeah. Does anybody remember? No. But we know what he means.
So what I liked about what I read this week was I was reading about being interpretation and understanding, and I kind of like his structure. It very seems like he's very much leaning towards Derrida, I think a little bit as a introducing a lot of structure in spots. Interpretation is like located in the inauthentic understanding, or possibly genuine inauthentic understanding. And interpretation is the basically the discovery of possibilities. Of
difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as they are projected by, in this, I apologize to everyone if we know this only because of Derrida. I'll completely eat my words if you can prove that to me. But this idea of the projection, the understanding, projecting its future, projecting the future, and the future possibilities, and the interpretation arising out of that projection. So in other words, it's like an automatic human reflex. We automatically interpret our possibilities as they emerge in understanding the world. So that to me, that's a very interesting point about interpretation. It is a inauthenticity, right, but it's not really something that's crippling. It's something that's expansive because it follows the projection of understanding.
So the understanding and possibility go together. Comes first.
Possibility is projected by understanding.
Okay, and then after that, you have the interpretation of what it means, right?
Interpretation, yeah, and the interpretation is it's often just it's often inauthentic. It's often a already always interpretation, in which case he would call that ingenuine.
Right.
If it's the already always interpretation of thrownness. But on the other hand, if it's a interpretation for the sake of self, or interpretation for the sake of Dasein, that would be a authentic, that would be at least a genuine interpretation, because it's actually furthering the projects which are projected by understanding.
So that does interpretation lead to a meaning, or meaning or meaninglessness?
That's right. That's right. We probably use interpretation as a device to forestall angst.
Okay.
So yeah. So you could say that. I think that the reason interpretation is so important to us as humans, is because it helps us forestall feelings of anxiety. Makes us feel like, well, even if I don't control the world, at least I understand it. It gives us those feelings of reassurance.
So
I have an opinion. I'm a man with an opinion. Huh?
Does angst come after the interpretation or before?
No, they're opposed to each other, I would say.
Okay.
In other words, I see I'm going beyond the text. Okay, I'm not very hermeneutical here. So what I would say is that, those are two different. They're treated differently in different places. We just talked about anxiety and how it is a kind of it's a signal from the mood. It's a signal from our mood to tell us to kind of like something's wrong, but we're not going to talk about exactly what it is right now. And the interpretation is something that's already built into us, probably like angst, but they're both kind of like moods, except interpretation is the brain lighting up. It happens it must happen in one of the advanced structures of the brain, and it's possibly what Kant was talking about when he was talking about judgment. It's the fact that everyone can make judgments, not just the select few with advanced reason or something like that. Everyone makes judgments. People do it around the card table or around the dinner table. There's no shortage of judgments when you have Daseins in the room. So it's the same thing with interpretation. When something happens in the world, our brain lights up as our understanding tries to project possibilities into events as they happen. And what lights up for us are interpretations. And if we can catch that moment, my opinion, if we can catch that moment of interpretation and understand what we are doing as we interpret events from our understanding, we have a good. I think it gives us a good. It gives us a good transformational hook or angle in order to help us interpret our moods and to further those projects which are for the sake of Dasein.
So if the interpretation is intelligible, then it gives you a sense of meaning, right? But
if
the interpretation is not intelligible, on page 193 of my query, he says that if it's not intelligible, then you have a sense of unmeaning or absurd.
Right.
He uses the word. He actually used the word absurd.
Right.
So, but this whole process, it seems like it begins with fear, and then it starts with fear, but then it leads to understanding, interpretation, intelligibility, and then meaning. Or if it's not meaningful, then you have a sense of the absurd.
Where are you reading from, James?
It's on Being in Time, but I have an interpretation by, a translation by Macquarie.
Yeah, I have that too. But I
Okay,
have
it's on page 193. Look on
okay,
page 193.
all right. I don't know why I have both.
You mean the English page numbers?
Well, this, yeah, there's on the side, they have like 152 on the side,
Oh,
but it's
you know,
193 at the top.
I need to know what the, yeah, I'm not going to go. crazy.
Heidegger page number is 152.
Oh, okay, 152.
Okay.
Well, I'm not going to go crazy looking for it because he's got 4 different numbers here.
Yeah, because that's exactly the page where he talks about meaning, and that seems like.
But I think if you go further, it's talking about what James, I understood what James is talking about is you can have that interpretation still within your constraints. It doesn't have to be an authentic understanding. It doesn't even have to be, you can have an interpretation and understand the possibilities, at least according to Heidegger, within the constraints of the world that you're part of. That you have to that anxiety or some kind of gap can take you out of those constraints so you can see it and then go back into it with full understanding and then choose to actually participate, or you cannot fully understand it, but within constraints see possibilities and make interpretations and create understanding and meaning within those constraints. It's not exactly the same type of authenticity that he's talking about if you use the gap to analyze it. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Hello?
Yeah, it does.
I think it's a state of being. It's a mode of being. It's what Heidegger refers to in the Stambau as a mode of being. In the Macquarie, it's a state of being. So the mode of being is I think we could say that interpretation is a mode of being, and it's a common mode of being. It's a shared mode of being. People like to get together and have the same opinions about things. So there's a lot of sharing of interpretation. But what Heidegger is sort of doing is going a step further. He says that interpretation comes from understanding, and never the other way around. We never take someone's interpretation and turn it into understanding. It's always a case of understanding delivering interpretation into our greedy little hands. And the other thing I really like, I don't think we fully addressed Jim's question about the absurd, but the other theme that I like that I was reading about this week was yeah, it slipped my mind. I was going to quote something from to Jim, but I think I lost that too.
Well, I'm in the section paragraph 32, understanding and interpretation.
Okay.
As understanding, Dasein projects its being upon possibilities. That's what we're talking about. I mean, because my page numbers are totally different than all of you for some reason, because I have a PDF of Monetary and a hard.
Yeah, that's what Heidegger says if you trust his word.
Yeah, and this being towards possibilities, which is all hyphenated, which understands itself is itself a potentiality for being, and it is so because of the way these possibilities, as disclosed, exert their counterthrust. Ruckschlag? I don't know. Is that something?
The rucksack or something?
Ruckslack? I don't know. Ruck, S-C-H-L-A-G. R-U-C-K-S-C-H-L-A-G.
What's the English word but next to it?
Well,
before
it's counterthrust.
Huh?
Counterthrust.
Counterthrust. Okay, cool.
Okay, counterthrust upon Dasein. The projecting of the understanding has its own possibility, that of developing itself, and then it's the German sich auszubilden. This development of the understanding we call interpretation. So there's the process of understanding that leads to interpretation. And in it, the understanding appropriates understandingly that which is understood by it. I love this sentence. These are just, I mean, really, it makes you want to drink wine. In interpretation, understanding does not become something different. It becomes itself. Such interpretation is grounded existentially in understanding. The latter does not arise from the former, nor is interpretation the acquiring of information about what is understood. I mean, it just goes on and on. It's a section, it's paragraph 32, and it's in the Macquarie, I'm sure it's everywhere, but it's previous to what we've been reading the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's not in that many places actually, but I think it's rather unique in
I agree.
in being a more or less for me it represents a very Derridian moment.
Derrida.
Yeah, Derridian, whatever. It's kind of like where he's actually capable of forming a picture of possibilities as a what this guy Reza Dasein. Reza Dasein calls that spectra. So it's an actual a moment in which the mind is producing spectra, and the spectra are the interpretations that are produced out of understanding.
Yeah, I find him very difficult to try and read, so I won't go into that.
Okay. Yeah, we'll leave him alone. It's like mentioning Trump to my oldest daughter. You know,
Oh, is it? Yeah, a lot of people.
She can't deal with the subject matter at that point.
I was really excited about a particular concept Heidegger touches on, this appeal of the they, the world with answers. And I'm going to post a quote. It's actually in section 177, so we can all find it. We don't have to worry about page numbers. I'm just going to.
Section.
Yeah, 177. I mean, it would be later on in 38, falling and thrownness, and then there should be a 176 in the margin, or sorry, the 177 is what you're going to go to, but it's in that section 38, falling and thrownness.
Oh, so you're going by that? You're calling that the section?
I'm gonna.
Well, at the yeah, and then the numbers on the side. I'm not sure if those are the German numbers or what they're qualified as, but
Well, I'm gonna put it up on mine.
Okay. My quote might be slightly different than others. This one, I believe, comes from the McQuire and Robinson copy.
Well, this
So it
is
might be
section
slightly
38. Where is
Yeah.
it in
It's
section
177. It's a little further along. It's
On it's about Ottawa Talk, right? Ottawa Talk.
let me, sorry, the screen's changed.
She means Heidegger 177.
Yes. So you don't have,
It might
you don't
not be
have
in
the
here
sections.
in this PDF then.
oh, it should be. Just let me see what it's.
No, because he leaves out this existentialism.
Yeah.
Leaves out some sentences from the sections. This is
Okay. It starts with the supposition. I believe the paragraph starts with, since the way in which things have been publicly interpreted has already become a temptation to itself in this manner. That's the
Okay.
copy I have, what it
okay,
starts
so
with.
it's actually 178 for me.
Oh, is it?
Since the way in which things have been publicly interpreted has already
really?
become a temptation.
Oh, that's just yeah. It's between 177 and 178.
Okay.
I mean, I have a PDF, so don't go by the numbers, just go by the.
Yeah, it's like right. Yeah, it's just before 178.
So why
Well,
don't you read it, Shauna, what you have? What you
Sure.
find?
So the supposition of the they, that one is leading and sustaining a full and genuine life, brings Dasein a tranquility for which everything is in the best of order and all doors are open. And I mean, I think the sentence actually before it and after it helps give more information. But it's that idea of we're seduced by the they in many ways because there's this order or there's these answers held within. And I just thought it was a very astute recognition of what happens, of why people cling to the they.
Could you read us the whole passage so that we can know
Oh
why,
gosh,
why you
okay.
think it is why you think it is astute?
The paragraph starts at, on with since the way in which things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Since the way in which things have been publicly interpreted has already become a temptation to itself in this manner, it holds Dasein falls into its fallenness. Idle talk and ambiguity, having seen everything, having understood everything, develop the supposition that Dasein's disclosedness, which is so available and so prevalent, can guarantee to Dasein that all the possibility of its beings will be secured, genuine, and full. Through the self-certainty and decidedness of the they, it gets spread abroad increasingly that there is no need of authentic understanding or the state of mind that goes with it. The supposition of the they, and this is the quote I chose, the supposition of the they that one is leading and sustaining a full and genuine life brings Dasein a tranquility for which everything is in the best of order and all doors are open. Falling being in the world, which tempts itself, is at the same time tranquilizing.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a bit of inauthentic being. Yeah,
Opium of the masses.
that's the inauthentic, right? Yeah.
I want some. Give me some.
But I mean, it also talks about the seduction of it because there's the answers there. There's this neat packaging there. And so that's why I thought it was astute of Heidegger to recognize why are we compelled to stay in the they.
Yeah. So it has an
We're compelled to stay in the they so that we don't mess up our life.
Right.
We've got this. We've got a deal, you know. So don't mess it up.
But I think it's become messed up, and I think that this might be a different paragraph if he was writing today.
What worries me in life is, these old couples I've met, elderly couples or even not so old, and generally they've lived the perfect life. And they're sitting there impeccably dressed, impeccable children, everything's worked out. And they look bored shitless. And I was thinking, gee, I'm the complete opposite, but I have a little bit beyond bored shitless going in me. Does anyone like to comment on that?
I can see that. The thing about the throne interpretations is it seems very real and concrete and immutable. And when you realize that, oh, wait a second, that's just an interpretation, and I didn't even choose the interpretation, I just picked it up from everybody else, then the world becomes transmutable. It becomes malleable. And that's very exciting and unsettling and threatening at the same time.
So when you have an understanding, right, you also understand your possibilities, right? And one of those possibilities is of one's own death. And I think Matt talks about, you have to confront your own death. You can't talk about it in general terms, like they, others, we're all going to die or something like that. But you have to take it very personally and imagine what it's like for you to not be in the world anymore. And so that's a kind of one of the authentic ways of being, right?
I think that's useful useful from like a Stoic tradition,
Yeah.
but it's also interesting how Hannah Albrecht said, well, wait a second, what about life? What about creation? What about bringing things into the world, which he seemed a little deaf to.
Right. Well, but is that realistic though? You know, you see things changing from one state to another every day. So realistically, you have to, you know, understand that you're going to change, right? You're changing with everything else, and one of the changes is death. And if you believe in the afterlife, then you can say you're gonna, you know, change it to another living being or something, you know, reincarnation or eternal return, as Nietzsche says. But the fact is, you're going to one day, you know, not be here as this identity, as this person.
And that is exactly a place, and I mean, you can use anxiety, but where another gap happens, where a gap happens,
Exactly right.
and you're on the edge, and
Right,
you're seeing something, and then you see a real understanding and value, and then participate in the world, choose to participate in the structure without so many constraints, because you want.
I think that might be the sense of the absurd, that that you would not be here one day. It doesn't sound very meaningful or intelligible. It sounds very absurd that would happen to you, right?
Well,
but that's a reality. Right? That's a reality you have to confront, right?
Well, there's a specific orientation of being unto death.
Right.
That the orientation is to the time. It's the temporality.
Right.
So in other words, he's already beginning to introduce temporality into the discussion.
Exactly. Right.
And there's this distance from the time that you occupy right now, the now, all the way until the time when you're going to, so to speak, leave the earth, to kind of credit the illusions that you were giving, Jim. So we have a kind of like a death actually becomes a kind of a destination. And we have an interloping period between where we are right now in time and some other point in time that's ahead of us, that's in the future, where all creativity and productivity and, you know, basically all those things, all possibility lives in the future. So the fact that we're going to see a limited amount of possibility in a limited amount of time starts to become, to a certain extent, crucial, or maybe we had no idea of the imperatives or the crucialness of our limited existence. We didn't see that there was actually a limited amount of possibility, that there's actually a possible limit to our lives, completely aside from what happens after death, if you want to take account of that. But the point of our own death becomes very important to us because it helps measure off a big block of time, or some block of time. So given that we have that capacity to measure that temporality in which possibility occurs, and our projects occur to a certain extent. In other words, projects could continue beyond our death.
Right.
So to the extent that we are actually creators of these projects up till that time, in that temporal period, we are actually engineers. 100% engineers of our future. We have the whole project plan in front of us. We actually have the beginnings of an entire Gantt chart of like what people are going to be doing and where they're going to be doing it, who they're going to be interacting with. The potentiality of our future is opened up in a new way because of being unto death.
Right. So you're saying that by acknowledging one's death, it opens up maybe more possibilities for you, right?
That's right.
Yeah, you might say, well, I'm gonna die. You know, I could die tomorrow. So let me do something, right, to
Right.
enjoy my life, in the time that I have, right?
Whatever you want to do. Yeah,
Exactly
that's right.
right. You can
It's for
do
the
almost
sake of
anything.
you. If you're the guy that
Sure.
wants to
Right.
buy a cruise ship or buy cruise tickets or buy a yacht,
Yeah,
that's you. That's it's all for the sake of you.
exactly. So you don't have to worry about, maybe the cost, or you don't have, if you have the money, you're not worried about,
It
Sell your
sounds like one
sell
of
your
your
children. What hell?
Yeah.
What the hell?
sounds like one of your American expressions, to own your death.
right. Or to own your life. And you own your life by owning your death, right?
So once you
Yeah.
accept the facticity of your mortality, for me, the anxiety is, have I brought forth a meaning that's worthwhile, and am I living consistent with that? In like Viktor Frankl's sense of, you're responsible for figuring out what the meaning of life is. Get busy and live accordingly.
Mhm.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
that's a belief system.
Yeah.
That's not. I
It
don't
sounds
know.
pretty, sounds
It's an
authentic.
interpretation.
Sure.
What?
It's an interpretation.
Okay, but it's an interpretation of a belief system.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you're saying that death doesn't, mean that much? Isn't it in that interpretation?
Doesn't seem like I can do much about it. So the next thing is
right.
what can I do something about?
Oh, so you're
So
saying
the idea.
you don't even
So with
think
this Frankel, I think. I mean, in my opinion, Frankel is trying to counter the idea that we have a meaningful life. That life is meaningful. So he's coming from a different tradition, if you will, and he's delivering that the idea that we can actually die after not having a meaningful life, or maybe a slightly more meaningful life, but there's no meaning to that life in itself. That meaning is beyond human existence. I think Frankl would probably agree with me on that. This Heidegger is a completely different point of departure. In Heidegger, you have the realization of potentiality. So Heidegger has never lost sight of the fact that he's trying to define authentic potentiality as opposed to some package deal. And that's what he's basically explained to us, that there's no package deal
Right.
that you can accept that will not just throw you back into the hands of the they world. The they world will try to capture you back. And it's only by pursuing Dasein's potentiality that you're going to escape from the clutches of the they world, because we all can grasp, we all can clutch. And part of what he's talking about in these chapters is how to grab potentiality for oneself. And the potentiality is not a potentiality to meaninglessness. It's a potentiality to a something for the sake of which I exist. And the discovery of what that particular view or horizon of existence is entirely up to me. It's not something that needs to be controlled by everyone, but everyone might already have an idea that I've been inculcated into of what that is. And so I need to be a little bit cautious about my already always interpretations of my possibilities, because my possibilities are basically disclosed every moment that I think.
Aren't we saying the same thing, that in the end it's your responsibility to declare your meaning, that there is no inherent thing to discover?
Your inherent possibility? No, because it's not static. Yeah, because it's never static. It's always dynamic. It's always occurring every moment that you're thinking.
Right.
Every time, you know, you basically refocus on something in the world, your mind is challenging you to reproject possibilities. So to say that, you know, oh, it was already there, or it was already something I needed to be doing, right? It was already, you know, I should have read the Bible more, or whatever, you know, if I'd read one more Heidegger book, whatever it is, you know, just kind of like there's no simple answer, but the possibility of an authentic answer to the problem lies in being for the sake of itself.
I was just going to ask a question. What feels better? Does it feel better to be murdered by an authentic person rather than being murdered by an inauthentic person?
I've never tried either, Stephen.
Why? What, to me, the inauthentic person is a person who judges me by some rigid, thought out universal standard. They believe their standard is universal.
I don't think there is a universal standard. I mean,
I know that, but there are people who believe there's a universal standard. For example, the humanists tend to be very much of that persuasion.
well, maybe. I mean, but what are you getting at by saying, is it better to be murdered by an authentic heart? I mean, what are you trying to
I'd rather be murdered by a person who has a real, you know, feeling that they just want to get rid of me, rather than somebody who's judged me by some external standard and said, he doesn't measure up, so we have to get rid of him. So I'd probably rather be murdered by somebody who has a purely personal motivation for murdering me.
Yeah, but
Why are you so concerned about other people's motivations and so forth?
I think we do interact with other people.
Well, yeah.
And other people can matter to us. And, you know, being murdered is one of those important things in life, I think. And I want to, you know, a special relationship with my murderer. I don't want to just be judged against the XY graph and say, oh, you don't measure up. Let's pop him off. No, I want to, you know, I want something a bit more than the XY graph being used on me.
Well, somebody named Daniel just said something. What did he say? The eye eventually creates a meta caricature. It's cute. Well, you took us off our train of thought now, Stephen.
Well, I think, you know, obviously he's talking about other people.
And being
So he's talking about other people with, you know, bad intentions. He's talking about the worst case that can occur between individuals, and he's also talking about, and he's trying to hijack the theme of the finality of life. In other words, we have a eventual destination in life. We don't actually have a date for it, but we know it lies in front of us. So when we and he's saying, well, what if you just could conceive of your life ending by somebody else's hand? Wouldn't it be cute if I felt better under certain circumstances about being deprived of life for one set of reasons, as opposed to, or by one type of person, authentic, and then would it matter if a completely inauthentic motive person would end my life surprisingly to my concern, possibly. So, and he makes it sound like he has no concern at all. So, you know, I mean, that's the idea. And it's you're either, if you have no concern for your death, then it's very easy to pursue life one day at a time without changing any of your schedules, because there is no schedule. What being unto death delivers to us, to you, to the person who believes that it can be open up possibilities, is that it opens up potential, is that it defines a range, defines a hypothetical range of possibility. And that hypothetical range of possibility is important. Just as the hypothetical range of possibility, if the only way that we could possibly die was by murder, it would be the same. In other words, it wouldn't matter so much how our hypothetical range of possibility was ended. It would be much more important what our projects were during that period of hypothetical possibility. Right. So there's my answer, Stephen.
So it would be more interesting to know if you are living authentically, and if you happen to die, you will die, in an authentic situation, right? Where you're being authentic when you die, rather than the other way around, right?
Yeah, it's like the idea, the Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you got your family with you, you're communicating with other people,
right?
You're just being a normal human being. Hey guys, look, come on over here. We're going to have really good, what do you call it? Not Taco Bell, but we're going to be catered, by a great restaurant, and so I want you guys around, because I'm going to die today, so let's get over to my house, and it's it's like it's sort of your last chance to hang out, so to speak.
Right.
So that would be to me, that would seem to be extremely authentic, to try to create meaningful, have meaningful relationships enter into your life, even on your last day.
Mm-hmm. Well, she was living a pretty authentic life, being on the Supreme Court, right? Working, and doing what she believed in. And that would be and she died, in that state of authenticity, which is more meaningful than the other way around, right? But if you are not, living authentically and you died. It hasn't to do with whether the other person that caused your death is authentic or not. There's no reason to be concerned about that, right?
Well, I don't know if that's true. I mean, of course, in our world today, of course, RBG is, one of the rocks that people look to. But we have no idea if she was living authentically to herself. She was doing something in the world, and but she could have been following along for a while, and we don't know that. We just admire her, and we are encultured to admire certain people in certain positions, especially the ones that fight the system or something. It's and can get away with it. I mean, we praise certain things, which is part of our enculturation. Either you're for something or against it, but you're still within the same framework. So I wouldn't necessarily say.
Well, I think the general belief is that she was living very authentically and made decisions based on her ideals, right, of what she thought was best for people.
Yeah.
And that's why she was admired.
Well, Jim, you bring up a good question. A good statement, because it has me thinking about this authenticity. Now, I certainly think she was influential and a leader in taking direction at times, or leading people in a direction at times that was not popular, which requires a lot of strength. Right. But then I'm trying to connect it to Heidegger's understanding of authenticity.
Right.
And she very well may have done that as well, because you would have to come to the edges and say what's happening in my world, and sort of go to the edge and sort of see how it hangs together and be awoken to that. Mm-hmm. And I certainly would assume that to some degree she did that. But I also think that authenticity at some point would almost make you seem weird. Because if you really saw things and interpreted it, people who are living in the they world may not connect to what you're saying. So I think you know, in some senses in my mind, I'm thinking if you're truly on the edges, you're almost 5 steps ahead of people and they're not going to understand what you're saying. I actually knew an individual like that, and he was respected because of the work he did, but he would start talking about stuff, including, you know, that they're going to charge for internet. This was like 10, 15 years ago. A lot of what he said basically was true. It would just come true because he was on those edges and sort of seen by some as being a little bit, you know, on the edge. So she was still quite palatable to people. You know, she still was very much in the they self. So that's what I'm struggling with in my mind in terms of, was she really authentic to the point?
Okay. Okay, Shauna, I completely disagree with you about this. The authentic self is the part of the self that we actually are capable of fostering as a project. So in other words, we make the self, Dasein makes his own existence a project. And that's the difference between authenticity and inauthenticity. So making your existence a project is basically the Heidegger's main criteria for authenticity. And if you make your existence a project, as opposed to a project that exists in the world, okay? If the project exists in the world and you are not tied to it in a meaningful way, then it is not a authentic project. It's more of an inauthentic, genuine project. So maybe you've got a deal with some other people to make some money and start a corporation, and you're going to get to be the IT leader or something like that, and you're going to you're almost at the point where you're counting your pennies, you know, because you're going to IPO or you're going to, you know, and these things can be really important and they can really work, but you might just do it 5 days a week. You might do it while you're holding another job. You might do it just following the lead of somebody else that you trust. And it resembles the way you're always being at work kind of life. So where you spend plenty of time playing golf and so forth. So this idea that just that having an authentic project makes you weird or would make you separate you from other people, I think doesn't make any sense to me, because there's no difference between the kind of projects that you would undertake with your own existence being a project, except that I would say your other projects I would think they would become more successful. And the way they would become more successful would be through your projection, through projecting possibility for others. And people would respect you for that, and they wouldn't abandon you because only for the reason that you had thought of some things before they did. And this is where authentic taking care of comes into the picture. Sure. When we actually go in front of someone and we present a pathway, not an accomplishment, but we present a pathway to accomplishment for that person. When we're taking care of others in our lives in an authentic way, we will tend to make the most friends. Doing things for others will not make you a lot of friends. The person at work who tries to take the project off of this desk and the project off of that desk, and then show up at the boss's door, you know, to say, yeah, I took care of that stuff for you, boss, you know, and elevate yourself, you know, at the cost of your colleagues. That person is not the most popular person at work. The popular person at the work is the one that is a mentor, the one that will show a pathway to others so that they can accomplish their projects. So,
sure. Well, James, one of the things I tried to do as I've been going along is not necessarily take the idea of authentic and tie it to sort of the conventional sense of authentic. And so I've been challenged by that, and I continue to work with that. But Matt also spoke in his lecture that people who have their projects that they care about still might be in that inauthentic state. And it's, are they able to separate themselves from the they self? And so that's what I'm speaking to. Now, an extreme would be that people would see them as weird because they've separated that much, but that's not the only example of it. It's, can they separate them from the they self? Now,
Yeah, I think,
the example that was given, with Ruth is that she's revered for good reason. But what it was she was doing good work in the world as it hangs together right now.
Mm-hmm.
Very influential work. But the key thing is, that idea of being true to self, is it within the realm of the they self, or is it true to self that sort of extends outside or on the edges of the they self? And so to me, that's a nuanced difference. And so I agree with Audrey. We don't know necessarily, because what we saw her do was work within the they self and challenging, the parameters within the they self, but not necessarily taking, a step beyond that, sort of that authentic of, this is how it's pieced together.
I understand how that's difficult. I see it as difficult to kind of estimate the authenticity of others. The question of, like, why am I not authentic comes up sometimes. And the way to answer it, is by asking some questions. When you were doing something, were you doing it for the sake of your existence, or were you doing it because others were doing it and it seemed like you were trained to do it? So in other words, there are sort of like telling signs. There's this, it seems like individuality and independence a little bit, but it's not exactly that. It's more the idea that you're creating a project out of your own life.
But it's caring. You still have to care for others. And like in the case,
well, that's other things are attendant to that. And I was just pointing out, in caring for others, in taking care of others, you are actually moving towards you're actually separating, authentic actions from inauthentic actions. And Shawnee, your comment about the vulgar meaning of authentic, I understand. Vases are authentic, and if I buy the right brand of window cleaner, that's authentic. That's true. That meaning of authentic exists. When Heidegger is talking about authentic, he's talking from being there. So from being there, from being in the world, and projected into the world, but for the sake of self.
Yeah.
So that's what Heidegger's talking about. He's not talking about a better type of cleaning fluid. Yeah.
Yeah. And to me, the distinction I was trying to make is how we use authentic often is to be true to self. And I feel that there's a nuanced difference with the way Heidegger explains it. It's almost that awareness of, this is the they, that we're thrown into this. And so it's that awareness piece that we're thrown into this, that, not necessarily being true to self, but we're thrown into this. This is what we're in, right? We're in this fog, right, and we see the distinction.
But it's possible for somebody to be authentic completely. I mean, just to further that point, is I think it's possible for somebody to be authentic almost completely by accident. You could actually be concerned, for your own existence, and experiencing angst and all the other moods, and being very fully in the world of the they in that sense. And but your concern actually rises to the point of, there's a problem with my existence if I don't start taking care of others in my life. There's a problem with my existence if I don't and not take care of others in a kind of vulgar, inauthentic way of like picking up their projects, you know, and taking care of them for them. It's this kind of like understanding that the authentic person would quite by accident have a lot of charisma and appear to be irreplaceable. And I think that the point you were making about this, like disaffecting others, would be true if those others hated people who were charismatic, if they automatically hated people who got things done, hated people that were superior to them, that they felt were superior to them in some way. Yes, people can develop enmities. You know, like inauthentic people can develop enmities for lots of reasons, but it's just as likely to be accidental distaste for others as it's likely to be an accidental engagement with others. In other words, others do take care of each other, both authentically and unauthentically. And the fact is that people can respect both types of people. They're not limited. Inauthentic people are not limited to appreciating the work of other inauthentics.
Well, I think it's cool that you brought up the idea of a person could be accidentally authentic from Heidegger's, you know, term authentic, because I would say no for this reason. They might, in some ways, walk like a duck, talk like a duck, but they're not. And what I mean by that is, they may feel some anxiety, like this doesn't seem to mesh with me, but until they come to that a point of defining, I've been thrown into this. To me, that awareness is what's required for Heidegger's authenticity, as I understand it. And so if you're not aware of that distinction that you've been enculturated and so forth, and sort of wake up to it, like I say, you might talk like a duck, but you're not a duck until you've recognized that thrownness, fallenness factor.
The notion of being aware sounds right. And I think the notion of being true to oneself is there's no there. Because this notion that there's a self to be true to is suspect. Because that self is a little bit like really what we'd think of as the self, but it's also the they, and it's the historicity of the they, and in that historicity of the they, people have been thinking about what does it mean to live a good life for a long time, and what we might recognize as somebody, well, that's an exemplary person. It's probably somebody that's living in some way consistent with what has emerged as a consensus of what an authentic good life is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's attractive because those are the kind of people around whom spaces of possibility open, and people like that. They're leaders.
Yeah. Well, there's no contradiction between being authentic and caring for others, right? The others is not the they that Heidegger is worried about, that controls you and defines who you are. But the Dasein is also a true Dasein. I think Dasein is also in the world with others, and it's this one passage says it's others are part of the ready to hand us, of our existence, and so caring for others is, I think, can be defined as being authentic. Maybe if it's truly authentic, and then you can see that in the leaders that that we see in our world. We could tell which leaders are really truly caring about others, and which ones are just pretending to be, right?
It's not for us to judge. I
Well,
don't.
if you care about our democracy or our world, then you would have to judge, right? If you don't judge, then you're not gonna be able to make the right decisions of who you choose to be your leaders.
Yeah, well, then you're talking to the wrong person.
Yeah, because it's idle talk. This is where I kind of take Jim's side on this, Audrey, because idle talk is is basically tends to rule the day among people. So idle talk is basically substituted for discourse all the time. And the idle talk can be judgments. In other words, anyone can be judged. You can be judged. The idle talk will try to take control back from Dasein and try to create an average everydayness. Try to average out humanity. Try to fit you into the range of average human beings in your particular role, and see where they can enlist you to fit in the chart. And the danger is, I'm afraid the danger is judgment, although there's probably better words for judgment. It might be interpretation, because Heidegger doesn't use the term, but I jump to it myself. There's people, when people get a chance, they'll kind of compare different people's behavior and decide, which person they like best. And this is gossip. Heidegger calls it gossip. We'll revert to gossip all the time. That is by the way, that is a telltale sign of inauthentic Dasein. Inauthentic Dasein is almost always gossiping. Inauthentic Dasein seems to have an abnormal amount of curiosity because he can't actually control his own understandings of the world. That's why I'm saying it's not an impossibility to sort of like understand what is authentic in people and what is inauthentic in people, especially if you read this book, because he points to a lot of things. It's the use of idle chat to eliminate the possibility of being lost in the they. So in other words, the they is powerful, and the they substitutes idle chat for meaningful discourse.
Right.
And if you don't participate in discourse, you're likely to be, a truck might come to pick you up. I mean, bad things could possibly happen. The murderers might find out about it.
Right.
So,
I understand that,
yeah.
but I don't understand what your,
Right.
what did I disagree with that made you?
With Jim?
Yeah.
Well, I think you said that I can't judge. So in other words, I would never judge anyone because I don't have the moral authority. That's your moral position. I understand that is probably very well reasoned, and I won't try. I didn't mean to attack you personally for that. I just meant that, whether judgment is a part of what Heidegger calls idle chat, and the idle chat goes on among inauthentic persons a lot. And if you don't actually replace it with your own discourse, and there's different ways of doing that.
How you participate
Discovered.
in the world is how
You can actually go into a situation where there's nothing but idle chat 24/7, and actually change the tone of the conversation. I don't know if everyone else has done that, but it's something you can do as a Dasein. So so it doesn't have to rule the day. The inauthentic Daseins don't have to always rule the roost. You can do quite a lot as a Dasein, as an authentic Dasein, acting authentically as Dasein. As a Dasein. Go ahead.
Matt used the term Dasein.
Yeah.
Dasein. That refers to the they, the person, the they who's in control, right? who's kind of trying
No,
to control your.
Dasein. Well, I mean, I think that's what Matt meant. But Dasein is, I think it was invented by, what's his name? Kierkegaard. Yeah. So it means the mass, the all the people.
Okay, the mass.
So it's not the they, because the they are actually proximal. They're the people that are proximal to Dasein.
Sure, right.
And these aren't the Dasein. Dasein is the culture, the political system, and anything that a sociologist would love to study. The culture, the society, the government, the educational system.
Sure.
Unless you happen to be the superintendent of education or something, but the Dasein is a far more nebulous term, but it means the collective of man that seems to be arrayed against the individual.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't, as individuals, we shouldn't have a chance, because what's the opposite of the individual? It's Dasein. And who is Dasein? Well, it's everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody seems to have a lot more weight. And it's only when you scare away that kind of boogeyman that you can actually look at the they and what the they is. And that's what Heidegger is doing here.
Sure.
He's looking at the they, which is the beings, the interworldly beings that are proximal to us within our world. In our world, the world is not the universe. The world is not the earth spinning. The world is all the things present that are present for us, not at hand, but all the things that are present that we have sight of. That is our world. Other beings that we have sight of, that is part of our world. So can that, be political figures? Yes, it could. But it is meaningful. There has to be a possibility of a meaningful relationship. But he says there's something that they always have in common. They always have a public behavior. They always try to limit the existence of Dasein. They always try to find the average kind of Dasein and try to create the safe space for the average Dasein. It tries to take away any possibility that you have. If you have a possibility, they will try to extricate it from your grasp. Right. They will try to grab it for themselves. Right. They will say, we already did that, don't worry about it.
Right, which they included all those political figures. Heidegger, didn't really shy away from getting involved in politics himself.
People, it's just people.
Right, but he was involved in politics.
Yeah, I did the Democratic caucus in Nevada. Right. Talk about having a good time because, 75 people are voting. It's like all that math and all that. I had a computer to do the math for me, right. But then you have to explain the math to the voters, to the participants. Right. You have to explain all the difficult math. Sure. So it's to talk about having a good time, but it was in making friends. So it's just like politics is real, whether it's for government or it's in your office or it's the politics at Thanksgiving in the family. It's always. Right. It's always there.
It always involves other people, right?
Yeah.
Right. So they are all those people, but they are also the others that you are in association with and that make your Dasein in the world, right? A meaningful existence, right?
They?
Yeah.
No, you make the meaning.
Right, you make the meaning.
You make the meaning of your existence. In other words, It isn't over until it's over. And,
Right.
and your existence is kind of like an everyday thing,
Sure.
but it does not have to be when you distinguish your existence from your potentiality
Sure.
of existence.
Right. Right.
So in other words, the potential of existence always lies beyond.
Mhm.
And there's a beyondness to Dasein. That's what Heidegger is trying to shout to us about.
Right.
There's a beyondness to being that we have to grasp and take hold of and use for our own sake.
Right. Right.
Yes.
So he's talking about Dasein as a individual self, but also an individual self in the world with others too, right? Others also are significant, right?
Right.
Okay.
Things.
Right. So it's not just an isolated self, right? Dasein.
It's not just what?
Dasein is not just an isolated self, right?
Right.
Relatedness in hand, when you're making let's say making a chair or something, right? You're thinking of other people that might be using that chair, or you think about other people that have involved in cutting the wood, right? For your parts that make up that chair, right?
Right. Yeah, this is not individualism.
Right.
In other words, this is not a individualist rant. In other words, being an individualist is okay because it kind of shelters you a little bit. It's a way of gathering an aura of sanctity, either political, like libertarian we have in the United States. We have whether they believe that the individualism of an individual is a sense of propriety that protects him from the government, from the others. And that's not existentialism. That's not what Heidegger is talking about. He's saying that it's through the process of existing with others that we are likely to. It's in that world that contains others, contains the world of our projects. And he's not saying everyone has to start suddenly thinking of themselves as an individual and designing their projects that way. No, that's not what he's saying at all.
Right. Right. So that person could be, be involved with many other people in politics, right? That person could be living a very authentic life, right? Working with other people and for other people in government or in society, right, in general, right?
Yeah.
I noticed that the topic of possibility has come up, and one thing that I didn't connect with initially, I think Warren helped clear it up a bit with something you inadvertently said, or maybe consciously said, whatever. But this idea that the inauthentic or the fallen world is where actually we see possibilities open up that, geez, I'm going to post that quote again. Let me just see what it says, everything. Okay, everything is in the best order and all doors are open. So it's actually in the they self that we experience that. I don't know if you can speak more to what you were talking about, Warren, because I think you helped clarify that for me.
Sure. So all doors are open. This is my interpretation of that. It looks like all of the possible doors are open, but what you can discover is that, oh, wait a second, those weren't all the possibilities. There's a whole nother world of possibilities that I never even considered. When you take responsibility for your interpretation, as opposed to just assuming whatever was given you. So you think all the doors are open. You don't even know what the doors are.
Yeah, and then the way he states it almost seems like that's when the doors all seem open, and yet when you become authentic, they're not all open. And so what I got that to mean is the they self is not giving the direction. So you're in this wanderless, and so at one point all these possibilities have been presented, albeit limited. Yeah. Is that your take, James?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. The supposition, it says the supposition of the they. And actually, this is not a sentence, I don't think. Oh, brings is the verb. Okay. So the supposition of they brings Dasein tranquility. And yeah, that's true. We're tranquilized. We become tranquilized by the they. It's the publicness of the they is our fix. This replaces the opiate. Religion is the opiate of the masses for Stephen. It's the publicness of the they brings Dasein tranquility.
I have my dream of being tranquilized by reality, and I'm standing on a roadside. Along comes a very beautiful woman in a sports car who has a mansion in the hills, and I think that would be the perfect tranquilization for me. I want to chase inauthenticity.
Granted, Stephen.
Now you're reading. Now you're living.
So yeah, that was a great that was a great point. But now we lost Shauna. So the got some great comments here. I'm not keeping up.
Okay.
I have a question. How radical is Heidegger?
Philosophically, yeah, he's totally radical philosophically. He even talks about destroying philosophy at one point. So he did create. This is kind of like the canon that might have got the ball rolling on what they call postmodernism, the idea that every philosopher could be a revolutionary. So yeah, that was probably Heidegger's fault by getting that ball rolling. So he's very radical, and that's the. But he's not radical in the kind of like Marxist way, or fascist way, or individualist way. You can't derive, like I was saying before, you can't derive libertarianism from Dasein. It's more of a completely differently founded view of the self based on existence.
I would expect the radical element is much bigger than all that. It's radical in the sense of culture. This is his whole point. He's radical in the sense of how culture's been going since Aristotle, isn't it? That's his point.
Yeah, we got
everything around,
Right. Yeah, we have almost 2.5 millennia of belief to deal with here. It's not just we're not just going back 2,000 years like who was it? Nietzsche. He's basically fulfilling Nietzsche's prophecy. Nietzsche was basically saying, if we go back to the Greeks, we can see that they understood things better than we did. And then Heidegger is saying, well, if we go back to the Greeks, we can see the point in time where we might have got lost. He doesn't blame everything on Aristotle, but he says we could almost spot that point in time where we got lost. And that was good 2.5 centuries before every atheist's famous target, 3 centuries before. So it's like kind of like
Nietzsche had it in for Socrates, didn't he? So he claimed.
Yeah. Those guys were all about the same time. Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle were a succession of philosophical schools, and they represent, Aristotle especially, but also Plato and Socrates represented the bringing together of all the philosophical schools that had been established in Greece. And so there was a lot of discussion to go on, and that's what you see in Plato. And then in Aristotle, you kind of have, for the first time, you have the expert in philosophy, more so than Socrates. Socrates would come and win every argument because he was an expert, but he was an expert with an agenda. And then Aristotle turned that around, and he says, "I'll become an expert in existence and show you everything, an expert view, or an inauthentic, we would say almost an inauthentic view of everything." And he didn't exactly get a lot wrong. He almost discovered evolution on the way. He was like brilliant man.
Well, he was
so it's very
fascinated in
difficult,
his
very
lagoon.
difficult to attack Socrates. I mean Aristotle, because of his brilliance and.
Well, he was fascinated in his lagoon, wasn't he?
Fascinated?
In his lagoon.
The lagoon, yeah. No, he was definitely someone with a project. That I think that's the worst thing you can say about him, is that you could say he was authentic. He was definitely authentic in the sense that he understood that his project was everything. That the project was everything. That there was nothing that wasn't covered by project. So he was like right next to Heidegger. Heidegger is in that sense, he's an Aristotelian. He's an expert. Heidegger, before he was Heidegger, was an expert on Aristotle. You can't forget things like that. Yeah, that's what he did for a living, was teach classes on all the different books by Aristotle.
Diogenes. What would you say about Diogenes?
He's a cur. No, they said they call him dog face, right, or something like that. I don't know. I don't know what to think. I haven't actually read the books or fragments myself. I studied what do you call it? Not sophism. I studied what do you call that? Stoicism, and I like those guys. They're pretty clever, but yeah, I don't know much about Diogenes. He was a pessimist, right?
Cynic,
yes. Yeah, well, the famous quote is when Alexander the Great supposedly came to meet him, for this is this famous philosopher. And Alexander the Great says to him, "Is there anything I can do for you?" And Diogenes says, "Yeah, you can get out of my sunlight. I'm trying to read." And Alexander goes, "If I wasn't Alexander the Great, I'd want to be Diogenes." And Diogenes says, "If I wasn't Diogenes, I'd still want to be Diogenes." I'm sure you've all heard that one.
Yeah. Absolutely. James, I like this little summary thing. I think actually Mark posted it, and I like it because I'm one of these global thinkers, and I like how it sort of sums things up. And there is one term, just entanglement. Oh, shoot. Do I have it right? Let me just see here. I don't know if you can speak to it. And just as an aside, James, I know this is not the end of our meeting, but I really appreciate how we can all ask questions and how you are just so conscientious with us all. That really creates a good feel in this group. And I think in terms of Dasein, as far as Dasein go, that current is felt, and I appreciate it. Anyway, the quote.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. The quote I posted, oh, it might be lost now already. Oh, no, I think it's up there. It basically just indicates, I'm going to just post it one more time. It just says that there's, as it's going right away, it sort of summarizes the things that create the fallenness, the temptation, tranquility, alienation, self-entanglement, characterize the specific kinds of being which belongs to falling. And I know we have spoken to the tranquilizing part. I don't know, just in a quick, the temptation, is that the temptation of the they self because it has the steady answers, the clear, already determined answers? I have to say I'm not fully, the self-entangling I understand, but the alienation is, I think, that experience that of disconnection. But it also goes on to say that the alienation cannot mean that Dasein gets factically torn away from itself. So that alienation doesn't cause the angst. So there was a little bit, some confusing bits for me in that. Especially with alienation, I would have to say was a little bit, because I would assume alienation would cause the angst, and he says no.
He does.
Like section 178, Heidegger 178. I'm going to go with, oh, it is quite deep into section 38, falling enthronedness again. Yet this, it starts in Aquarium.
Yeah, he says, one sentence here, real short. The tempting tranquilization aggravates the falling. So tranquilization, the temptation is here a accelerator. So you're falling, but you're tempted to self-tranquilize. You're tempted to self-medicate. We're tempted to self-medicate, and I had a very down day. I had a very falling day. You can see my background. I'm back trying to earn a few dollars gambling. It's like I was watching videos most of the day. I had a condition today. I won't say it, but I was not myself, and so I was in that self-induced self-medication of self-tranquilization. Continue, Shauna.
Okay, I was getting tranquilized there a little bit myself, I think.
Yeah, yeah. You wouldn't have loved it. I went out and bought some donuts. That was.
Well, so I think between everyone, and Warren sort of spoke to that idea of, why is there such popularity about the the possibility thing. But this other one that's got me is the alienation, because he says, yet this alienation cannot mean that Dasein gets factically torn away from itself. On the contrary, this alienation drives it into a kind of being which borders on the most exaggerated self-dissection, tempting itself with all possibilities of explanation, so that the very characterologies and typologies which it has brought about, which it has brought about are themselves already becoming something that cannot be surveyed at a glance. This alienation closes off from Dasein its authenticity and possibility. So this alienation is a different understanding of that word than what I would consider alienation. To me, alienation would be like an angst that would wake you up, like I'm feeling a disconnect. Mm-hmm. But in fact, it just causes more fallenness. Is that your understanding, or everyone's understanding?
I would characterize it as a falling alienation. So in other words, there's kind of a thing called, I studied Marx a little bit, and part of that had an alienation. There was a book called The Grundrisse, which talked about alienation, but it was alienation caused by removal. It was ultimately caused by removal from the process of productive processes by the bourgeoisie, of course. But the idea of the Heidegger's alienation here is a genuine mood of removal and from others. And it's very easy these days for someone like me to get in that kind of mood. Like, in other words, I only spend less than an hour a day traveling around in a mask in stores and things. I don't really do much outside and with other people. So it's very easy to sort of like get into that a kind of like a de facto alienation but the kind of alienation he's talking about is where you sort of like feel so bad that you're actually impose self-isolation on yourself. And this is where the anxiety can actually be very powerful, because that gives you more thinking time. So there is a kind of a backfire effect. I'm not sure if he talks about that here or not. But so,
Yes, I think
so
he does.
that he does good. Yeah.
He says it's getting entangled in itself. Dasein getting entangled in itself, which,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, like the donuts. Exactly. I mean, if we went around the room and talked about our falling, we could each talk about our falling and say, yeah, I'll tell you about what happened to me 3 months ago, or, that it happens to everyone sometime.
So once you decide to separate, then it's okay, I need to do some analytics here and figure out everything. And it's an endless hole. So we can spend the rest of our lives trying to figure it out, and it's not actually very fulfilling. It's
no, but you could read a book too.
Well,
you could just sort of like pick yourself up by your suspenders and go read a book. So that's all. It's just it's a kind of like a really difficult thing, because I don't know a lot of substitutes for reading Being in Time, but it is kind of like all here in one book, which is a nice, makes it a nice package, albeit what people say is like the most difficult book ever written. So I can't like recommend it to everybody, but I do give dribs and drabs to people I know. I sort of like dole it out in bits.
I understand
that's very rewarding when it comes out.
He didn't finish the book though, right?
Sorry?
I understand that he didn't finish the book.
Well, I have my own theory about that. I think the book is a little bit finished. He does talk about temporality a lot in the first part. And then in this last part, he talks about time and temporality. He often talks about what other people have written, have done. And I think what happened might be a bit of a trick. He might have been working on a book about Count York, a biography of Count, or actually not a biography, but a philosophy book about Count York's philosophy of history. And he had some written pages, and he might have stapled them into Being in Time, is my idea. So I don't know if that's true, but that was my reaction, kind of like when after reading the end of the book, he might have actually, to me, the last part of the book is a little embarrassing. It's not wrong. It's not opposed to anything in the first part of the book that he says about temporality and time and temporality. So, and temporalizing, his idea of temporalizing temporality, and for temporality to be a horizon for Dasein, and for there to exist both authentic and inauthentic horizons for Dasein. So these ideas are very clarifying, I think, and the way he talks about time in the end of the book, in the last sections of the book, is I think it's very rewarding. I think it is. He's on the right track. He talks about the kinds of moods of prediction that we have in temporality, how things might happen, but or as opposed to they should happen, could, or would happen, or as opposed to they might happen, basically the way we existentially modify our language in real life whenever we're talking about time. So I think that's very valuable, and that's from the end of the book.
There's a French philosopher named Levinas. Have you read him? He was a student of Heidegger, read Heidegger, and he had, from there he developed his own philosophy of transcendence, and some people compared him to Derrida. And for him, transcendence, the meaningfulness of transcendence is the other, right? And the other is what gives meaning. That one transcends out of one's subjectivity towards the other.
It sounds a little bit like Buber, Martin Buber, I Thou,
right,
which I read. Yeah, so it's kind of like it sounds a little similar to that, but I don't like to put down one philosopher by saying I've heard that before. You know, it's like, yeah, maybe this is a really valuable take. Yeah.
Right.
What did you think, Jim? Is Levinas right, or is Heidegger right? That the they is the leveling force, or is the other the target?
Right. Well, I think he probably agrees with Heidegger, you know, up to the point where he, you know, realizes that you know, the subjectivity of the Dasein has to find meaning outside of that subjectivity of the I, and it's in the other. The other is the transcendence that one is looking for. You know, without that, there's a loss of meaning. But I'm not sure. I haven't really. I just you know, touch on. Just read a little bit about him. I'm going to go into it a little bit more. But it's interesting to compare those two ideas. But they're all, you know, like Derrida, you know, Heidegger, and they're all like trying to, you know, go in a direction that's away from the Western tradition, you know, since Plato, you know. And I know Heidegger likes Heraclitus and I think Parmenides, yeah, particularly because he wrote a book called, he wrote a book called The Greek Thinking, and he has like 2 of the 3 chapters on Heraclitus. So he's bringing back philosophy to existential, you know, existential plane, away from transcendence, away from that idea of being outside of existence. And now you have these other philosophers like Derrida and Levinas, you know, looking for meaning in transcendence. Right? So it's,
I'm not really into transcendence much. I read Ralph Waldo Emerson and Thoreau.
Sure.
And I think Emerson was kind of like interesting on that, you know, but I don't think it's and I think it has a meaning. Kant used it. It was the meaning was for Kant was the higher reason, that one entered into a higher state of reason by reasoning correctly.
sure.
Essentially, and then for the religious, Emerson was a preacher. For the religious meaning of it, I'm okay with people being religious. I'm just saying that Heidegger was leaving that behind. Heidegger was talking about when he brought up transcendence, it was basically to show that there was a possibility of going from here to there. And I think for Heidegger, it's very much that he thought he got to he really felt that he got to the essence of the problem at the beginning of the book.
Right.
That being there is the essential problem to be defined. That the essential problem to be defined is being there, and who is it? Who is being there? And then what are the possibilities for being there?
Yeah.
Going forward, and it just sort of like I think it was a multi-step realization,
Right.
and but it's not essentially a philosophy of. It is a philosophy that's inherently transcendent,
Right.
and that's what I would say.
Right.
But it is not about some transcendence that's achieved through becoming closer to other Daseins. The only possible transcendent that might be achieved would be that kind of like hypothetical transcendent to a different world. In other words, by being authentic that one actually produces a completely different world in almost every aspect. So, and that might be true for some Daseins. That might be true for some Daseins. But I don't think we can really it's not something that I don't feel like I could hang my hat on. The best I've achieved so far is kind of like going in front of people that I care about, caring for them authentically, and even caring for them in the sense that I can embody this philosophy
Right.
of giving meaning to existence.
Well, those possibilities of being, right, are forms of transcendence, right, out of existence, right? Because
the possibility, it's a possibility of transcendence.
Right, possibilities of transcendence, or these different modes of being that you, Dasein, can be, right, can be there.
Well, the modes, I would say the modes of being, once again, the mode of being is a possibility.
Right.
It's not I think for Heidegger, it's not an actuality. It's a possibility. It's always, it's always something that there are things that are primordial in Dasein that we already own because of our birth, that are kind of like our birthright.
Right.
Like care, for example, like concern, really positive things that are already existing for Dasein. But to actually be transcendent, the highest I can think of is like almost everyone in the world is authentic almost all the time, and everyone else is being authentically caring and helping the ones that have not figured it out yet to get to the point where they can be authentic themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the highest possible transcendence that I can think of. But that's not really it's not really how everyone would think. It's just, I realize that it's very esoteric, and that's not one of my projects. My project, if there is a project that I just like the one I just spoke about, that would be great, and I'd be glad to put my name underneath it. Yeah. But my project is more like finding opportunities to act authentically, care authentically, and that's all. I won't go for the whole. I forget who you were talking about, Levinas.
Yeah, Levinas. Yeah.
I would never suspect that I could go for the whole thing, except for like one day at a time.
Sure.
And in my life, it's been like that. I know my own fallingness. I know my own capability of falling. I can have like gold in my fingertips in terms of like a relationship, and then it'll also like crumble in 2 days. So, and it's not, and it wasn't all my fault, right? It's like, it's just sort of like the ontical nature of this relationship has changed, and I don't even know it. I still don't know sometimes what happened.
Sure.
It's just like I'm not one of those really bad men that people talk about.
So when you say actuality,
yeah,
what is an actuality?
Actuality. Oh, an actuality would be just anything that's ontical, that anything that can actually appear in the world. So that's what I would call an actuality, is something that's ontic, that as opposed to just an explanation, but something that has substance to itself, like a thing, being, so forth.
Is that described as a preparedness
or condition,
or is it a ready hand or preparedness a hand?
It doesn't have to be a thing. It can be any kind of a thing, but it could also be a situation.
Oh, okay.
It can be a situation. I think is really important concept in Heidegger. Maybe that's what we mean when we say entanglement. We're in an entanglement, and that's maybe that's the translation, the Stumbach translation of it. In the quarry, it's called, I think it's called a situation. And so it's the entanglement or the situation that is really key for our understanding. If we understand the situation, then we once we understand a situation, we produce the possibilities adherent to that situation.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay. And then we have, next is the interpretation, right?
yeah, the interpretation is almost everyday, an everyday kind of like product of human intelligence,
Okay.
where the interpretation springs out inauthentically, from whatever our understanding of of our entanglement is, or of our situation or entanglement is. So whether it's the world, in which case it would tend to be inauthentic every time, the interpretation, we would just simply say, we've got we're up against a lot here, and so on and so forth, or we could look at it as a situation which is really meaningful for us, which is our project is dependent on. Our project seems to be depending on getting through a particular situation. And if we don't get through the situation, we call that a failing, a fallenness. If we get through the situation, if we can see the possibilities, if we interpret the situation correctly, and are able to get ourselves through it successfully, then we're ready for whatever new possibilities await.
Right.
So it's the project. It's the success of the project is really separate from us, but it depends. The fact that we own the project, when the project is authentic, then basically our interpretations become key to the success of the project.
Right.
Yeah, and that comes from having a strong sense of possibility, a strong projection, a strong human capacity for projection. When we have that human capacity for projection, we tend to create a lot of success in our projects. We can learn to sit at a boring poker table and get our stack bigger instead of smaller, things like that. So that's some of the very, really dumb kind of like possibilities of project. I actually get mail from poker experts, where they describe what they're doing, where they live, and stuff like that. And it's kind of like, it's kind of cool, because they're all human. We're all Daseins. We're all human beings. Mm-hmm. And I lost money to one of these poker experts. So that really feels good to have this guy sending me mail once a week, or even more often if I agreed to it, and I was actually sitting at a poker table to him, and he was explaining to me what was wrong with my poker game as he was earning my money from me. That was a really cool experience to have. And at that time, I guess he was like around 19 years old, and now he's more of a mature person in his 30s.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So it's like experience works. There's no question that experience is key to all levels of life, and it's experience to our being with others. It's key to our being with others. But the others can form a group. The they, and that when the group is in control, we don't work. We don't do as much. We don't work as well. We start to sacrifice our projects, we compromise, and that's basically that's basically our life. So, you know, sometimes it can be a series of compromises.
So are we about halfway through the book now?
Yeah, I think my book's about halfway open. Yeah,
No, we're, you know,
almost, not quite, but close.
so we're pretty much into the meat of the
Division 1. Yeah, we're getting to the end of Division 1,
okay.
and he's going to starts getting better. Actually, I like Division 2.
So after the angst, once you get past the angst, then there's another stage of self-discovery, right?
Well, let's see. Yeah, it's yeah, that's right. It's care. Division 1 ends up with care,
Right.
and truth, and then Division 2 is more about temporality and resoluteness. So this is where you start learning the Division 2. He's trying to pass on resoluteness as a tool, which we can use to as insurance against the. We use resoluteness as an insurance against the they self. And then he starts getting, and then he ends up by getting really deep and talking about historicity and within time, and and defining the within time, temporality and within time. The very last chapter is titled "Temporality and Within Timeness as the Origin of the Vulgar Concept of Time." So he's trying to isolate temporal analytic from Hegelian time and vulgar time as historicity. So that's all. It's just a different slant on things, but I found it very rewarding. I like the Division 2 quite a lot. Especially, we're already talking about the facticity of death. So the facticity of death is like really major. If you don't believe in the facticity of death, whether you're a Christian or Muslim or a free thinker, it's like something that's very extremely useful. Because it puts you on a level playing field with people who are other ages. When you're if you're able to be at peace with people who are older than you and people who are younger than you, you don't feel kind of like an alienation. You lose the sense of alienation because of that attends your age, whether it's a young age or an older age.
I just wanted to tell you about something. I could say probably I could recall when I was about 8 months old. I had an experience. My mother would leave me in the pram outside somebody's house as she went to visit them. So I was out there in the sun. Oh, actually, I think we're in our own yard. Anyway, I was getting a bit bored being left out there. I used to like looking at the human face. You know, that amused me. I was looking at everything and I thought, well, everything looks dead. It's uninteresting. And then I thought, oh, all I have to do is look in the sky. And I looked up in the sky, but there was only a dead sky as well.
And that might have been a reason, one of the external reasons for your mood that day, but you probably had something in your mood that came from within. And that sky just became a symbol or a trigger for whatever was within you.
Oh yeah, well, I'd get bored easily by a certain stage, you know, somewhere about then, you know, 6 or 8 months or before I started to crawl. And like I was always crying because I wanted my mother to come along because I could look at her face moving around, and I liked that. That kept me amused.
Yeah. 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 Others are important, even if it's just to enhance our mood, to get a sense of helps us get a sense of where we're at, who we are. So, I guess back to what Jim was saying about the book. I think the book doesn't have a really good ending, and the book has kind of like a taste to it, like it's when the ending of the book is a little bit like, well, I finished that paper. Well, I guess I sort of finished this project. People can read this now. It doesn't have the chapter where it sums everything up and tells about the future and tells about how great it is to be authentic or anything like that. So that's kind of like there is the kind of like for some people, there is kind of like a loss at the end, because the chapter that tells you how great it is that we've discovered everything and how is actually replaced by a chapter that just says Hegel was off on the wrong track, wasn't he? Or something like that. Yeah, so that's all. I'm just saying that Heidegger could have done a better job of the ending. But the last chapters are worth reading because they tell about time. They divulge some important secrets about Dasein in time. And if you don't read those chapters, you'll miss a few pointers, which are very valuable. So that's it. Jim's not here. What do you want to take it, David?
Yeah, we've lost a lot of our group significantly.
Some of our key heads are gone.
Yeah. I think, well, we've been going, 2 hours 15. That's pretty good. No, this is a good session. A lot of conversation. Great conversation here.
Thank you very much.
All right, how about next week? I already posted next week's. It's already up. Okay. So let's continue this.
You're ahead of yourself, David. Just like Heidegger said. Yeah.
I listened ahead to the next one, and that's a good one.
We're always ahead. We're always ahead of ourselves. That's what defines us as Dasein.
Yeah. Next week we'll have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Good conversation. Good group. See you all next week.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.